What's going on, guys? This is Rob. We are back with DC's Absolute Power event, and in this video, DC's God gets killed. And what's crazy is that's the least interesting thing that happens here, if you can believe that. So, this initially opens up with a Wonder Woman tie-in, of all things. And you've basically got Wonder Woman, Billy Batson, Mary Marvel, Mother Xanadu, John Constantine, Detective Chimp, and then Jim Corrigan, who are all playing cards. And it seems pretty innocuous. Also, is it just me, or does Jim Corrigan look exactly like Jason Blood? Unless I missed something and Jason Blood is the new host for the Spectre in DC. I don't know. The cool thing here is that while they're all playing cards, in the middle of nowhere, an Amazo attacks and starts taking it to everybody. Now, for those of you guys who have not been following Absolute Power, the long and short of it is that Amanda Waller is making her move against all the superheroes on Earth, and she's winning. Right? Like, she's winning big time. And the Amazos are the means by which they're doing it. But we also know what's happening by way of Failsafe and Queen Brainiac, which we'll talk about as we get further into this video. The long and short of it is, not only do these Amazos copy powers, they take powers, seemingly steal powers from people. And so when you have like all these beings who are here, none of it makes a difference. The first person that this Amazo goes after is John Constantine, and rightfully so, because people don't realize how powerful John Constantine is. Headcanon here, I'm pretty sure there's stories in DC Comics where Constantine has altered the very fabric of the universe itself using magic. This guy can be nuts at times in DC Comics. Of course, this leads to like Shazam, Mary Marvel, and Wonder Woman jumping into the fray, but like Shazam gets sent flying because now that this Amazo has the power of John Constantine, it can seemingly manipulate and take out virtually anybody. And these are all magically imbued beings who are here, which means it answers the question, what would it look like if like John Constantine decided to kill the DC universe, right? Next up, it's Spectre. Now, Spectre is the embodiment of God's wrath or God's vengeance or God's justice or whatever it is DC wants to call it at that particular point in time, but he's basically an extension of God on Earth. And like, once this happens, Spectre sends the Amazo flying, but Spectre is not accounting for it, because what Spectre does here is he actually kind of steps up to this thing and it says, I am afraid you are mistaken, Metal One. True vengeance comes as lightning, though it seems some are not patient enough to wait for even lightning, and he says that once this thing attacks him. When that happens, the Amazo siphons off the very power of the Spectre itself. Now, this is kind of uncharted water here, right? Because can you siphon off the power of God and steal God's powers? Can that be done? The reality here is that the Spectre is simply just a spirit, right? It inhabits a physical form. You can kill the physical form, then the Spectre has to just jump onto somebody else. But it's weird to see that happen here, and I don't quite know how DC squares this circle. But here's the crazy thing. Mary Marvel and Wonder Woman step up, but because this Amazo now has the powers of the Spectre, it immediately incapacitates them right off the bat. So much so that even when Shazam finally returns, it makes no difference, because what happens is that this Amazo seizes the power of Shazam and Mary Marvel and strips them of their abilities, seemingly alongside Wonder Woman. Now, because Wonder Woman's powers are not really magical in nature, which is to say you can't really siphon abilities away from her because they're kind of part and parcel to herself, but we're actually going to see that's not true later on. All this really does is weaken her momentarily, enough to basically allow the Amazo to go after her directly, and more likely just take away what we would consider to be the part and parcel aspects of her character. Super strength, super speed, different things along those lines. This does lead Billy and Mary Marvel to flee, and it actually goes directly into the Shazam tie-in as part of Absolute Power, which is really cool, because one of these Amazos, that poor soul, it ends up running up on Black Adam, and woe betide that guy, man, because he does not know what he's getting into, and it's amazing. But the reality here is that an attack by Detective Chimp, right, who's just literally a chimpanzee who's a detective, for those of you guys who don't read DC Comics, sentences like these are why I love comic books. This basically leads to like Wonder Woman making her escape, and she takes off. And so what she ends up doing is actually joining up with Superman, Batman, and all those guys, which we'll get to here in a second. The next thing we do is we jump to the Green Lantern tie-in with Green Lantern issue number 13 and the introduction of a whole new Lantern that we've never seen before. Now this picks up with Hal Jordan, the main Green Lantern of DC Comics on Earth, being held captive by Amanda Waller, who's basically pummeling this guy, trying to get information out of him. But what's interesting about Green Lantern at the moment is that his tie-in does deal with events here as far as Hal Jordan goes. Everything else is amazing because it really just sort of extends with what's going on with the Green Lantern mythos, and is kind of a great advertisement for what's happening in the Green Lantern comics, which are amazing right now if you're not reading them. Green Lantern is so incredible. So what it does is it switches over to Jessica Cruz, who is one of the other Green Lanterns on Earth. And she kind of muses to herself about the idea of fear, about how she has a long and very strange relationship with fear. We don't need to go super in-depth into her character. I'll post a link to the playlist in the description of this video if you want to familiarize yourself with the Green Lantern mythos. The important thing about what's happening right now is that the Green Lantern Corps has basically been taken over. Traditionally, it was done by the Guardians of the Universe, and if my memory serves me correctly, they've been gone ever since the most recent Crisis event. And what ended up happening is a new guy named Tharos was put in their place. Tharos was kind of like this benevolent guy who wanted to like lead the universe into a better tomorrow. It actually turns out he's pretty nefarious, and what he wants to do is conquer the universe. And so he's bringing in all these different planets and then replacing their leaders with like shapeshifters. More so than that, Jessica Cruz, alongside a few of the other Green Lanterns, are actually part of a rebel force working against the main Green Lantern Corps and Tharos himself. The cool thing here is that what they're doing is they're speculating over everything that Tharos could do, what he's shooting for, all that kind of stuff. And Kyle Rayner chimes in and says he's trying to control the emotional spectrum. If you control that, you control the universe, which I don't know if I'm missing something, but like, when did Kyle Rayner start going down the path of Space Jesus? So for those of you guys who are a little lost here, I'm going to clear everything up. We are Comics Explained after all. So when it comes to the Green Lantern mythos, because this hasn't been covered in a long time, the cool thing about the Green Lanterns is that it's not just the Green Lanterns. You have the Red Lanterns of Rage, the Sinestro Corps of Fear, so on and so forth. It all comes from the emotional spectrum, right? All these different cores. The idea is that the emotional spectrum is almost sort of part and parcel to the source, which is to say the reason why everything exists, the very nature of God himself. If you can control the emotional spectrum, you control any and every emotion that exists across the universe and the very fabric of reality itself. There's nothing that you cannot do. There was a point in DC Comics when Kyle Rayner was able to attain and control all the lantern rings that existed out there, the Star Sapphires, the Indigo Tribe, the Black Lanterns of Death, and all that kind of stuff. And he became the White Lantern. Literally, he looked like Jesus. This dude was so overpowered. It was crazy. The White Lanterns are ridiculously OP. I don't even know if we covered that story arc per se. One of the other cool things that we get here, which actually began in Green Lantern issue number 5 of this current run by Jeremy Adams, is Sinestro is a Red Lantern now for all you Red Lantern fans. So this guy's driven by rage and he is immensely powerful. Normally he runs the Sinestro Corps, right? The Yellow Lanterns of Fear. So it's cool to see that shifting around. But following that, and really where it sort of ties into what's going on with absolute power and the things happening on Earth, is that much like the other superheroes that we've seen, that the Amazos are going after the Justice Society of America, specifically Alan Scott, who wields the power of the Starheart. Now, the cool thing about the Starheart is that because Alan Scott, as a character, was published by DC Comics long before the invention of Hal Jordan and the expansion of the Green Lantern mythos, DC had to find a way to consolidate the way his power was originally given to us with the way they changed things following the introduction of Hal Jordan and everything that Jeff Johns even did some, I don't know, was it 70 years later or 50 years later during his run and that kind of thing. The long and short of this is that unlike Hal Jordan or Jon Stewart or Kyle Rayner or any of the other Green Lanterns, that Alan Scott does not derive his power from the emotional spectrum of willpower. Instead, what he does is he channels what's called the Star Heart. It's basically a source of energy that was initially created by the Guardians of the Universe in the very early days as a kind of prototype to what would become the central power battery of the Green Lantern Corps, the means by which willpower is channeled from the emotional spectrum. So it's just kind of a way for DC to say that, like, if all the other Green Lanterns die, Alan Scott could remain and he could probably find some way to save them or something along those lines, right? It's also what makes him unique and maintains that role that, like, he was before all the other Green Lanterns. What sucks here is that Jesse Quick comes running up on this Amazo trying to find a way to stop it, and he seizes control of her. And that means that he now has access to the speed force of the Flashes. And while Jesse is not nearly as fast as someone like Wally West or Barry Allen, she's fast enough. So now this Amazo has super speed in addition to the power of Alan Scott. What's cool about this is that because Alan Scott wields the power of the Starheart, the power is seemingly in and unto himself. So he's actually able to pull it back from the Amazo and channel it back into his ring, which is dope. The problem is that they're all basically captured by Amanda Waller and taken to Amanda Waller's headquarters, which means now they can be used. Here's the crazy thing about the Lantern that we've never seen before. So as part of Jeremy Adams' run on the Green Lantern mythos, what we did is we saw that Hal Jordan was out doing his thing and then was eventually reunited with Carol Ferris. That matters because Carol Ferris was his on-again, off-again girlfriend, and I don't remember if they ever got married at one point in time, but Carol did wield the power of the Star Sapphires, basically the Lantern Corps that tapped into the love aspect of the emotional spectrum. Now, once the Green Lantern run was initiated and Hal Jordan was just back to the way he'd always been, operating on Earth as a pilot and doing his Green Lantern stuff during the more recent run, Carol was just kind of there, but she was with a guy named Nathan Allen Broom. And what ended up happening here is she broke it off and went back to Hal Jordan. And when I say broke it off, I mean, like, they were married. And she went back to Hal Jordan. The reason why this is so cool is because Nathan gives us this really interesting monologue where he says that for my entire life, I did what I was told. I went to school, I got good grades, I made my parents proud. At every turn, I'd see the rule breakers get ahead of me. They'd get the promotion, the money, the girl. And I thought it was just a matter of time. I'd do okay if I kept working hard, doing what's right, and then I met Carol, the one I wanted to marry to spend my life with. But she disappeared in a flash of color, and I was left with nothing. Nothing but a deep sadness. Nothing but sorrow. And so Nathan ends up becoming the Sorrow Lantern. Now, what his powers are, we don't know. This dude just popped up. The most likely ability that he has is to go on Reddit and just complain about how life's not fair, but he probably has other cool powers as well, hard light constructs and different things like that. And so what we do following this is we switch over to the Superman tie-in for absolute power, which is also incredibly amazing. So, as you guys saw with our previous coverage of the absolute power event, Superman was one of the first to fall in the sense that, like, his power was being siphoned off by the Amazos just long enough for him to be shot. Now, it wasn't enough to strip his power entirely. He was saved before that happened. But what you end up getting is Superman being brought to the Fortress of Solitude and being worked on by basically Mr. Terrific, right? Michael Holt, who's cool. And I'm so glad to see this dude is getting, like, some accurate representation in media in, like, the Superman film as opposed to the one that we saw in The Flash. He wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the Mr. Terrific that I had just come to know and love over the course of DC Comics. But there's also this kind of musing that goes back and forth, right? Why do we need the Kryptonite scalpel? Well, because Kryptonite's the only thing that can weaken Superman enough for us to be able to, like, cut into him and that sort of thing. What it also does is it shows us that the Amazos are traveling around the United States and basically doing Amanda Waller's bidding, right? Finding superheroes, implementing a curfew for general society, all that kind of stuff, right? If you have no superpowers and you are not a vigilante, you have nothing to worry about, right? That sort of thing. But all of this is really just sort of following the efforts of Zatanna, who's almost on a kind of rescue mission of sorts with Mercy, right? The two of them basically escaping. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Zatanna's really interesting. She was never my favorite character, but she's basically a practitioner of magic, but all the spells and everything that she casts, she says the words backwards, which is one of the reasons why I wasn't the biggest fan. It can make it really hard to follow her character whenever she's like casting spells and stuff. The other character here, Mercy, she's a little more interesting. So Mercy was at one point, if I recall correctly, the assistant or something like that to Lex Luthor, but she was exposed to the Lazarus effect, basically meaning she's been granted powers. And what it did is it turned her into a living suit of armor. So she can do all kinds of really cool stuff. She's not human, but she looks human. Now, how long that stays, I don't necessarily know, but she does have some cool moments here, because what's basically going on is that with Zatanna being rescued by Mercy, she's brought to the Fortress of Solitude, the one place that Amanda Waller would not be stupid enough to try to attack if she even really knew where it was. But the idea here is that those individuals who still have powers are being rescued and consolidated in this location. What few are left. And there is some bickering that goes back and forth, but of course, Superman finally emerges from his surgery, for lack of a better word, donning his black costume, which is usually what Superman does after he sustains some kind of an injury, right? Like he dons a costume. And then in turn, he just kind of starts telling people like, I need to know where my son is. I need to know where Jonathan Kent is, because he is every bit as powerful as his father. The reality here is that Mercy was supposed to be on a mission to try to find them. She ended up basically saving Superman, but couldn't save John. And where she considers it a bit of a failure, right? The response to Superman is, no, you did the best you could. That's all any of us can ask. Don't really beat yourself up. The other part of this is that traveling around the world because of what's happening right now and trying to rescue different superheroes that have not been snatched up by Amanda Waller is a very, very dangerous ordeal. Not only because the Amazos would be going after these different superheroes, but because it could lead to collateral damage, right? Like innocent people being caught in the attack. Because while Amanda Waller isn't really going after regular people, as far as collateral damage goes, she's like, hey, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? Might as well go for broke. And so with this realization, Zatanna chimes in and she says, okay, here's the rub. Let's start using what are basically called the dark roads, which are these kind of paths in between different places that exist out there in the world. So it's almost like the bleed, which is to say the space between universes, except it's on a far more local scale. But she says they're incredibly dangerous, right? They're invisible to nearly everyone, and you don't have to have magical abilities to traverse them. That normal people get pulled into them all the time. That's where stories about haunted streets and crossroads, it's where they all come from. She says the point is we can use them to transport people to operate in the shadows. The issue is we have to find the map of Mordru, and God forbid it lies with Mordru himself. Because let me tell you guys something. I know a lot of you guys don't know about the character of Mordru. Maybe you do. This dude is one of the most powerful and evil beings to ever exist in the history of DC Comics. And maybe we'll cover him, right? We should make a video on that guy because he's absolutely nuts. Mordru's dope, right? He existed before the universe came into existence, and he'll exist after, right? There really is no defeating or destroying this guy. He just jumps from one host body to the next. Not that dissimilar to Oblivion in Marvel Comics. And so ultimately, they all just agree to do it. But the question is, how do they access it? And that's where Zatanna says that the Dark Road responds to certain things, death being a good one. The fact that you've died before, which not really, he was just in a Kryptonian healing matrix, and the fact that he almost died now means Superman is best suited to be the one to enter the Dark Roads and lead a mission to basically start gathering people. The funny thing here is none of that's going to make a difference, because what's going to happen is they're going to choose a wholly different path. And so that leads us into the final part of this video, which is absolute power number 2. And this is cool, right? We're only 2 issues in to the main event itself, and all of this has happened so far, right? So what Amanda Waller says is superheroes by the dozens, detained and beaten, treated like the criminals they are, held permanently under lock and key. I feel safer already. And so she asks, what's the current success rate of Task Force 7? And the statement that's made is that Task Force 7 is performing admirably, right? 80% of all the superheroes across the world have been depowered and incarcerated. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out is over the course of Absolute Power, there is an actual limited series called Task Force 7. It largely focuses on smaller guys, right? Smaller teams, smaller superheroes who exist out there that normally wouldn't get a whole lot of attention. It's okay. It's not overly interesting. Maybe a couple of them are worth covering, but that is something to be aware of in all of this. The other part is that Queen Brainiac says, would not the next logical step be to lure them into the open, perhaps by targeting the humans they care for, companions, loved ones? And under normal circumstances, Amanda Waller would do that, but she says those humans are civilians. Our goal here is to protect ordinary people and keep them safe. I'm not a sociopath. Now again, what's going on here is we're talking about Amanda Waller, Failsafe, and Queen Brainiac. I'll give you a quick and dirty explanation here, but if you want to know more about them, I will have the playlist at the end of this video that basically gives you all the lead up to Absolute Power, as well as the first part that basically explains everything that's going on here. But in effect, Failsafe was a robot created by Batman himself, albeit by way of an alternate personality that we don't have to go into here, that was designed to activate if Batman ever killed anybody. It was believed Batman killed the Penguin, so of course, Failsafe activated. Now, Failsafe is working for Amanda Waller. Queen Brainiac came out of the House of Brainiac crossover in the Superman comics, where Brainiac had basically created a wife for himself. Brainiac was ultimately defeated, and Queen Brainiac was thought to be destroyed. Instead, her programming and everything was wiped, and so when she arrived, or at least crash landed back on Earth, Amanda Waller took Queen Brainiac and then basically mentally conditioned her as best you can with the robot, and now she's loyal to Amanda Waller. So that's kind of how this is all unfolding with these guys. But with those two at her side, Failsafe is the one who can design all these new Amazos. Queen Brainiac is the one that makes them as powerful as they are. So it all kind of comes together. But beyond that, you switch back over to the Fortress of Solitude, where Superman is there just kind of mulling over the fact that basically Amanda Waller has John, that Amanda Waller has a son. He's sort of panicking here, doesn't quite know how to cope with things as you would expect. And then all of the superheroes start bickering with one another over who's going to be leading the charge and whose plan they're going to follow. And then Nightwing steps up. And people who are fans of Nightwing, I know this was your moment in this story because you guys love Nightwing, and it's awesome the way he's written here. He says, for those of you who may not know, my name is Nightwing, and these are the Titans. We're going to get through this because we know something Amanda Waller does not. What we're capable of. She thinks we'll fold without super strength or heat vision or power rings. Please, we couldn't if we wanted to. Villains always believe their motives are universal. The only one Waller understands is her lust for authority and domination. She will never hear the call of selflessness. She will never recognize the will and the commitment of each and every one of us to protect the helpless, to fight against injustice and tyranny regardless of the odds. And that will be her downfall. And so immediately, Nightwing takes control, and he says, we have to run under Waller's radar, which means we'll be breaking into small teams. Most of the Titans are still powered for now, so they'll run defense for you. Batman, you say Waller has a mother box, the key to accessing the powers of the new gods, i.e. Darkseid, right? Go and get it, because if she unleashes Darkseid on Earth, believing she can manipulate and control him, she's in for a whole new rude awakening. Not only will he kill her, he'll kill us all, right? So like, we don't need that kind of stress in our lives, right? She don't want that smoke. He says, Superman, the multiverse is full of allies who will help us without a moment's hesitation. Find them. Ladies and gentlemen, as soon as I saw this, I was so excited. I was like, bro, is it happening? Is it happening? Dude, are we gonna get it, man? You guys know what, y'all know what I'm talking, son. Man, let me tell you something. Y'all know what I'm talking about, man. Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot. I love Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot's a super bunny. I love Captain Carrot so much. He's my favorite character in comics. Dude is amazing. But the next thing he says is Green Arrow is now working for Waller. That gives her an enormous well of information on us because he knows everything about us. Black Canary, pull together a squad to relocate and retrieve him. Wonder Woman, I want information on exactly where Waller is holding her prisoners, and I want them freed. Superman, You had something you wanted to say. The response to Superman here is, this fortress is impregnable. We'll use it as our base of operations. It's got armories, it's got armor, the whole 9 yards, everything we'll need. Nobody would be foolish enough to break into this place. What happens next? Wow! Right, the doors get blown off this thing, and here comes Queen Brainiac with Jonathan, who's been turned into basically an agent of Brainiac. It's like Future's End, but not garbage. It's amazing, because Superman's just like, what has she done to you, right? Like, what's going on? Jonathan immediately unleashes on all the superheroes and almost takes these guys out in one fell swoop. Superman's distracted. He doesn't know how to handle all of this. Queen Brainiac takes it to every single one of these guys. They thought fighting the Amazos was hard. They have nothing on her, because in an instant, right? Wonder Girl Cassie Sandsmark, Red Tornado, Wonder Woman, all these guys are immediately taken over by her. And while they are basically liberated by Batman, who's able to assist as best he can, the major threat here is Jonathan, because Superman is trying to reason with his son. Now, there is a superhero here by the name of Dreamer, who's able to quote-unquote dreamwalk, basically enter in and out of virtually any environment as she sees fit, almost like a combination of Nightcrawler's ability to teleport and Kitty Pryde's ability to phase in and out of objects, but essentially she was really the means by which they were able to break into this facility in the first place. But the fact is, she doesn't really matter here, and you'll see why once we get to the end of this video. The important thing is, not only is Queen Brainiac now here alongside Jonathan, Amazos are entering the fray. And Amazos, these guys are using the powers they've stolen, right? The power of the Green Lanterns, different things like that. It starts to heal itself from different attacks, so on and so forth. It's bonkers. What ends up happening here is that in his fight with Jonathan Kent, Superman fails to realize that Wally West has arrived on the scene, and that while Wally isn't a bad guy here, he's showing up with the only means presumably by which to defeat Jonathan, which is green kryptonite. It'll take them both out. You also get this amazing moment with Batman where he's like taken by one of the Amazos, and the Amazos just like, Batman, you begat Failsafe, who in turn begat me. Hello, grandfather. What fancy toys does this batsuit hide? He's like, ultrasonics, and never call me that, and just like takes down the Amazo. And so that's where you get like Blue Beetle Ted Kord and Michael Holt, who are just like, the Phantom Zone projector, right? Normally you send people into the Phantom Zone as a prison. If we activate the Phantom Zone projector, we can go there and they can't access us, right? We can regroup, we can figure out what happens next. All of this is being watched by Dreamer, who's sort of just flabbergasted because she's been working for Amanda Waller this entire time, albeit to basically keep her family safe, right? So she was doing it against her will. She's not a straight up bad guy, but she tells Amanda Waller, like, this is too much, even for you, right? Like, laying waste to the superheroes like this in a sneak attack, like, what are you thinking? Now, Superman is able to momentarily break through and get to John directly, so there is a piece of John left in there, but it's not enough, because he's just like, Dad, there's only one way to end this, and Superman's just like, tell me, John, like, what is it we have to do? And John says, you have to join us, and immediately seizes control of Superman. At the moment that happens, Queen Brainiac breaks the bottled city of Kandor. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Kandor was a city on Krypton that was shrunk down and bottled by Brainiac before Krypton exploded. But within the bottled city of Kandor are all these Kryptonians, when they're exposed to yellow sun radiation, gain the powers of Superman. And with her having no idea what she's doing, Aquaman shows up here on the scene, which is really kind of weird, and shatters the glass bottle. What that does is it unleashes all these mini Kryptonians who are in there that immediately start attacking Queen Brainiac. It's not enough to kill her, but it is enough to offer some measure of distraction while everybody else makes their escape. Because what happens after that is Wally West snatches up Jonathan Kent and then just rides off, literally takes off, while things start going sideways and everything starts exploding. And so with Superman realizing there is no way out, there is no saving this here, right? Like, the mission's lost. This dude turns into Hicks from Aliens, right? Marines, we are leaving! Like, he's just like, this is Identifier, Kal-El, Enact Protocol Black Zero. initiate self-destruct. He goes to blow up the Fortress of Solitude, right? So within the span of 10 seconds, Queen Brainiac seizes control of Superman, tries to destroy Superman after using red sun radiation to basically weaken all the little Kryptonians that were attacking her, and then Dreamer shows up, realizing if Queen Brainiac gets her hands on Superman, and Superman is taken by Amanda Waller and turned into one of her Amazo agents, it's game over for everybody, right? Everybody gets defeated. Dreamer shows up here, incapacitates Queen Brainiac, which allows Superman to jump through the Phantom Zone projector. Everything gets blown to pieces, and Jonathan is just there, right? And for a moment, he's his normal self. He's like, oh my God, Dad, like, what did I just do? Like, what have I done? There is a bit of discussion from the forces of Amanda Waller, which are just like, well, Queen Brainiac's dead, but the response of Waller is, you underestimate how powerful she is. I wouldn't ally myself with someone so easily defeated. Queen Brainiac basically reactivates and then seizes control of Jonathan Kent, brings him back under her programming, and then Amanda Waller chimes in and says, Jonathan remains under the Queen Brainiac's full control. The fugitives will be found. Remember, the boy has super senses. Trust me, wherever they fled, they cannot hide from a Kryptonian. And so the question's asked, what did they do about Oliver Queen? Because Oliver Queen is on their side. But what Oliver Queen doesn't seem to know are all the superhero casualties that are happening out there. All his friends, and by extension, members of his family, or at least his superhero family, are being killed or being captured, transformed, any number of things. And so Amanda's just like, don't worry about that, right? Like, this whole thing you need to know, have them do busy work. Only for us to find out that Oliver Queen is digging through all these little artifacts that belong to captured members of the Justice League as part of this busy work, and he comes across an hourglass. Now, some of you guys out there would be like, well, I mean, that's clearly an artifact that belongs to our man and it probably has no significance. Nope. I would say that probably belongs to Kronos, right? The Clinton version. And if that's true, while Clinton didn't really have any powers to speak of, he was a technological genius. And do you know what Clinton worked on? Time travel. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. This story is amazing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Make sure you check this link to the playlist if you need to get caught up. And I will catch you all later. Peace.